Well, it's my great pleasure to be able to introduce to you our new rector, the Revd Georgina Holding. And George, thank you very much for welcoming us into your garden.
Well, it's nice to be with you today, Nigel, and everyone there at home. Hello. Yeah, it's just wonderful to be here. Please do just call me Reverend George, everybody.
Right, well, George, you've now been here, for a couple of weeks, settling in with Ian and Samantha. What are your first impressions of Market Deeping?
We just absolutely love it here. We really, really do. We find it, it's just beautiful. The word I use to describe Market Deeping is delightful. It really, really is. And we have been very fortunate with the weather.
Yes.
And so we have been able to go on several walks. And even though we've seen people obviously social distance, we've just been taken with how friendly everybody is. Yes. Everyone's stopping and saying hello or just nodding. And yeah. It's wonderful. And I grew up not a million miles away from here, up in Grantham. Yep. Well, the Grantham area. And this might sound funny to people, but a lot of the architecture where I grew up, there was kind of stone walls and stone houses. And it very much reminds me of much of Market Deeping. Yep. So as soon as the removal men had gone and we walked down the drive, I just thought, yes, I'm home.
Okay, well, we hope that you will feel very welcome throughout your time here. We like to think of ourselves as being a friendly, welcoming place. Now, you've come to us having been vicar in the parish of Rugeley with Brereton in Staffordshire. Before that, you served your curacy in one of the parishes in the Grimsby area. But let's go back before that. What prompted you to want to be a priest?
Well, Nigel, we're going back quite a while now. So I felt drawn to ministry from a very young age, really. And I grew up going to my local church. And as a child, I just felt I wanted to be a priest, which might sound a bit odd, but that is how it all began. In my local church, I always felt content and happy. And I enjoyed, after the service as well, that feeling of being in a family and all belonging together. And I remember one day when I was a child, and the priest was saying the Eucharistic prayer, and I suddenly shouted out parts of it, which I didn't know I was going to do till I did it. You know, obviously you're not meant to do that, but I think I just knew I belonged saying those words behind the altar. And as I grew up, my sense of calling developed and matured. And after school and college, I went to university because too young, obviously, to then go into priesthood at that age. During my time at university, I had a very bad car accident. It's not an exaggeration to say that I nearly died. And I actually broke several bones, that I won't bore you with all of it, but I did crush a bone in my spine, which unfortunately meant I lost half an inch in height. And when you're under 5 foot, you know, you do miss it. But as well as that, basically they said I smashed my left kneecap and it had to be wired back together. And the whole physiotherapy went on a couple of years all in all. I had to relearn completely how to walk again. And I just felt the whole way through this awful experience that God was holding me and carrying me. And all I can say is I just knew that God had got me through this so that I could be ordained.
What an experience that must have been to go through. Yes, a real calling there.
So what is it, George, that you most enjoy about being a parish priest? What do you find the most fulfilling, the most rewarding? Then on the other hand, what do you find to be the most challenging aspect?
Well, Nigel, I am a people person, so I love being with people, and I just find it very rewarding journeying with people throughout their lives, really, on the different stages, the joyful moments, weddings, christenings, and things like that. But also, I do find it rewarding, that it might sound unusual to say, being with people at the more difficult times of their life, journeying with them through more sorrowful times, funerals and grief and illness. It just always feels to me a privilege to be with people at those times. So I do find that rewarding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And challenging?
Challenging, the most obvious one for me to say is there's never enough hours in my day, and I think a lot of people will resonate with that whatever they do. I'm one of them people, a Monday morning, I can wake up with 10 ideas for the week, and by the end of the month there's perhaps been time to pursue one of them. So I do often wish there was more hours in the day. On the other thing that is challenging is journeying with people. I've just said it's rewarding, and it is, and I do enjoy it. But it would be wrong not to say that it's challenging, because it most certainly can be. You can go from moments of great joy, something like leading a school assembly, a lot of energy and life and liveliness, and then you can get in the car and drive to sit with someone who sadly might be at the end of their lives. And people sometimes forget that ministers are human, and so it can be difficult because you are in a kind of cycle of up down throughout the day. It is rewarding, and I would say I enjoy it, but yes, it can be challenging.
Yeah.
So what prompted you, what caused you to want to apply to be the rector of Market Deeping?
I was in my parish, Brereton and Rugeley, for 6 years, and I literally just suddenly thought it was time to move on. And after a while I realised I'd been called back to the Diocese of Lincoln. I say called back because you know, I grew up in the area, did my curacy up in Grimsby. I very much always felt that Lincolnshire as a whole was my home. I have a lot of family and friends here, so throughout the years I've always been coming back and visiting people. Having said all that, I hadn't considered I might move back, so when I got the feeling and the sense that I was being called back to Lincoln, it was a surprise, but an incredibly happy surprise. I almost say a relief.
Yes.
You know, it was wonderful, and I started looking at what churches there were in the area and where my ministry might be, and stumbled across Market Deeping. Got in the car, drove the couple of hours here, and just fell in love with the place before I'd even got out the car, really. Went to the church, and of course it was before coronavirus, so the church was open, and even though there was no one in the church, it felt so welcoming, and it was just light and airy and open, and I just can't describe it. It felt welcoming. And so I read a bit more about St Guthlac's and the area and the people, and the ethos of the church and the values seemed to sit very well with my ethos and values. A traditional church, which is what I'm well familiar with, and a style of ministry I'm well familiar and comfortable and happy with. And the fact it's so welcoming, but to everybody, so it felt inclusive and family friendly, and the fact, yes, there's a traditional style of worship, but also the church is open to doing perhaps different forms of worship with the all-age service and how that could be developed, and also the fact there's a real heart in the congregation to be doing more outwards to support the needs of the local community. And I guess putting all of that together, that package together, so to speak, I just could really see myself and my family here in the church and the community. So here we are.
That's very interesting, and particularly interesting that you commented that your first impression walking just into an empty building was that it's welcoming. And that's one of the most consistent pieces of feedback we get from people visiting our church. It is a welcoming place. And we like to think of ourselves as being very welcoming as well.
Today's gospel passage is one of those which can be quite challenging for those of us who preach. What do you see in it that acts as a kind of pointer for our life as a parish, as a church, with you as our rector?
Yes, Nigel, Matthew 10 is not the easiest of passages to be working with, and in a way I wish there was more time to try and unpack it all, what's going on. It's one of them passages that jumps around from teachers to sparrows to family, but ultimately the whole message really is about discipleship, about wanting to be like Christ, wanting to follow Christ, about how to be a Christian. And that's what it's talking about. It talks about the teachers and pupils, and saying the pupils are not above the teachers, but they should strive to be equal, really. Strive to be equal. And none of us are above one another. That's what that little bit is all about, really. And we should strive to be the same. The passage then moves on saying, do not be afraid, which I think is wonderfully comforting. It says, don't be afraid, because God is with us. He knows the sparrows, so how much more does he know and care about me and you and everybody out there? So it's a wonderful message, really. So overall, I guess this passage reminds us that we are all equal in God's eyes, that God cares about all of us. And yes, I've been given a specific ministry here as rector, and hopefully a specific set of gifts to be able to enact that. But that's not to say we don't all have a part to play. We are all disciples. We all have different roles, but all are equally important. And the passage reminds us all that. And as well as all that, the passage reminds us, but it is God who is in charge. So I don't see it as my church, I see it as God's church. So yes, really, I'm really looking forward to being rector here at St Guthlac's and starting my ministry here. But what I'm really looking forward to is all of us working together for God's mission here in Market Deeping.
Well, George, thank you very much for sharing all that with us. It's been pretty intense, like being interviewed once again. So, if you'll indulge me, just one final question. What's the craziest thing you've ever done in life?
I'm going to go with my wedding, which people watching at home might think is an odd thing to say. I don't think it was crazy to get married or to get married to Ian. I feel the need to say that if he's watching. It was a great thing to do. But when Ian proposed, we then planned the wedding. I planned the wedding within just over 3 months. And those of you who've got married recently will know there's quite a lot to arrange, so doing it in a short space of time. But it felt the right thing to do. We wanted to get on with it. We wanted to be married. But as well as that, we didn't have a traditional wedding in the slightest. We had a rock music themed wedding, because that fits another passion of mine, really, rock music. Yeah. And me and my husband met at Download Music Festival, so it seemed to make sense at the time to have a rock music themed wedding. We had live bands, we had fire dancers, and the vicar who blessed the marriage was a friend of mine, and right before he did the blessing he actually even did fire eating. So there was a lot going on, and everybody said on the day, this is the craziest wedding we've been to, but everybody loved it, so I'll say my wedding.
Okay.
Well, George, that was very interesting indeed, and thank you for sharing that with us. I'd recommend we don't have fire eating in church. I'm a bit concerned about, the risk of it burning down. But George, I look forward to working with you. I'm sure the whole of the parish does. Look forward to working with you and setting alight the fire of the Spirit.
Indeed.
In our community. Yes. George, it's been great talking with you, and we look forward very much to working with you. And we do hope that you and your family feel most welcome here. George, thank you.
Thank you.